1. The hook. Most people believe fear is something you must fight. They push against it, suppress it, shame themselves for feeling it. But the Stoics saw something most people miss. They didn't try to defeat fear. Because fear isn't an enemy. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Fear isn't danger. Fear is a judgment your mind makes before reality ever speaks. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The harder you fight fear, the more control you give it. Stoicism offers a different path. Not resistance, not denial, but redefinition. Once you learn how Stoics reframed fear, it stops gripping your decisions. Your voice steadies, and your life quietly changes. If you're searching for calm in a noisy world, if you want clarity instead of constant tension, this channel is for you. Subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. Because what you're about to hear isn't motivation, it's a mental shift that lasts. Now, let's begin. 2. The modern struggle. Evelyn doesn't look afraid. She's competent, polite, reliable. The kind of person people trust without thinking twice. But every decision feels heavier than it should. Every email is rewritten. Every conversation replayed in her mind long after it ends. She isn't afraid of failing. She's afraid of being seen as not enough. Daniel's struggle looks different. He moves fast, speaks with confidence, carries himself like someone in control. Yet every quiet moment unsettles him. Silence becomes a courtroom, and his thoughts are the prosecution. What if this collapses? What if I lose everything I've built? What if I hesitate at the wrong moment? Neither Evelyn nor Daniel call this fear. They call it responsibility, preparation, being realistic. But fear rarely announces itself honestly. It disguises itself as overthinking, as caution, as the need to stay one step ahead. Modern life rewards this behavior. Busyness is praised. Anxiety is normalized. And constant tension is mistaken for ambition. So fear becomes permanent background noise. Not loud enough to confront, but strong enough to steer every choice. The tragedy isn't that they feel fear. It's that they believe it deserves obedience. They wake up tired without knowing why. They feel restless even in moments of success. Because fear isn't pushing them forward. It's quietly deciding for them. And this is where most people stay. Not because they're weak, but because no one taught them another way to see fear. 3. The Stoic interruption. This is where Stoicism interrupts the story. Not with comfort, not with reassurance, but with a question that stops the mind mid-sentence. Marcus Aurelius never asked how to eliminate fear. He asked something far more precise. What judgment am I making right now? Because to a Stoic, fear is not an event. It's an interpretation. The body reacts, but the mind decides what it means. Evelyn believes the silence after she speaks means disapproval. Daniel believes uncertainty means danger. But those meanings were never facts. They were assumptions repeated until they felt true. Stoicism breaks that loop. It pauses the reaction and places a wedge between sensation and conclusion. Between what happens and the story told about it. Fear rushes in quickly. But reason moves slower, and that slowness is its strength. The Stoics trained themselves to notice the moment fear first appears. Not to suppress it, not to obey it, but to examine it. Is this happening now, or am I predicting pain? Is this within my control, or am I rehearsing loss? In that pause, Fear loses its urgency. It no longer commands. It waits. And in waiting, it weakens. This is not emotional numbness. It's mental clarity. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to mistake fear for truth. For the Stoic refrain. The Stoic refrain begins with a quiet but radical idea. Fear is not a signal to run, it's a signal to look closer. Where most people feel fear and immediately ask, "How do I make this stop?" Stoics ask, "What exactly is happening here?" They understood that fear doesn't come from events themselves, but from the meaning we attach to them. Loss isn't fear. Uncertainty isn't fear. Even pain isn't fear. Fear is the story the mind tells about what might happen next. So Stoics learned to strip fear of its drama. They removed exaggeration. They removed prediction. They removed the future from the present moment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You are not disturbed by things, but by the view you take of them." That sentence alone dismantles fear. When Evelyn reframes her fear, she sees that rejection is not destruction. It's information. When Daniel reframes his fear, he realizes that uncertainty is not a threat. It's simply the space where action is required. Stoicism teaches that fear shrinks when it's made precise. Vague fear feels overwhelming. Clear fear feels manageable. Instead of saying, "Everything could fall apart," the Stoic asks, "What exactly could go wrong? And what part of that is actually mine to handle?" This shift changes everything. Fear no longer floods the mind. It becomes a narrow problem with defined edges. And once fear is defined, it can be met with reason. Not optimism. Not positive thinking. But calm, grounded judgment. The Stoic doesn't eliminate fear. He reduces it to its true size. And most of the time, that size is far smaller than it first appeared. 5 Practical Stoic Method. Stoicism becomes powerful the moment it moves from theory into action. The Stoics didn't rely on willpower to handle fear. They relied on structure. When fear appeared, they didn't argue with it. They questioned it. The first question is simple, but uncomfortable. Is this within my control? If it is, fear becomes unnecessary. Action replaces anxiety. Preparation replaces rumination. If it isn't, fear becomes pointless. No amount of worry can change what lies outside your influence. The second question follows immediately. Is this happening right now, or only in my mind? Most fear lives in imagined futures, rehearsed conversations, predicted disasters, scenes that haven't occurred and may never occur. By returning attention to the present moment, the Stoic collapses fear back into reality. The third question is where clarity sharpens. What would reason say if emotion were silent? Not optimism, not reassurance, but facts. What is known? What is uncertain? What is required of me in this moment? Evelyn stops rewriting messages and asks what is actually necessary. Daniel stops predicting collapse and asks what the next rational step is. These questions do something subtle but profound. They turn fear from a command into a prompt. Fear no longer shouts orders. It presents information. And information can be handled. Practiced daily, this method rewires the mind. Fear still arises, but it no longer controls direction. Calm isn't the absence of challenge. It's the presence of clarity. And clarity, once trained, becomes a habit. 6 Transformation. The change doesn't arrive as a breakthrough. It arrives quietly. Evelyn still feels the familiar tightening in her chest. The pause before speaking doesn't disappear. But something crucial is different. She no longer rushes to obey it. When doubt rises, she notices it, names it, and asks what actually needs to be done. The fear doesn't vanish. It simply loses its authority. Daniel experiences a similar shift. The pressure to anticipate every outcome fades. Not because the risks are gone, but because he stops letting imagined futures dictate present action. He focuses on the next rational step. Not the perfect outcome. Not total control. Just the step that reason allows. Nothing external changes overnight. Deadlines still exist. Expectations remain. Uncertainty doesn't disappear. But their relationship to fear transforms. Fear stops being a warning siren. It becomes background data. Evelyn speaks with less hesitation, not because she feels fearless, but because fear is no longer the deciding voice. Daniel moves forward without rehearsing disaster. Not because he's reckless, but because clarity replaces anticipation. This is the Stoic shift. Life doesn't become easier. The mind becomes steadier. Moments that once triggered panic now trigger inquiry. Situations that once felt overwhelming now feel specific. And specificity brings calm. They realize something profound. Fear never needed to be conquered. It needed to be understood. And once understood, it naturally loosens its grip. 7 Closing Stoic truth. The Stoics never promised a life without fear. They promised something more honest. They taught that fear loses its power the moment you stop mistaking it for truth. When you don't fight fear. When you don't run from it. When you simply see it clearly. It shrinks. Not because life becomes predictable, but because your mind becomes steady. You begin to notice that fear speaks first, but reason speaks last, and the voice you choose to follow determines the life you live. This is the quiet strength of Stoicism. No slogans, no hype, just clarity practiced daily. If this perspective changed the way you see fear, even slightly, share this video with someone who's carrying more weight than they admit. Leave a comment and tell us, what fear have you been listening to lately? And if you're ready to build calm, clarity, and inner strength in a world that profits from anxiety. Like this video and subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. Because wisdom isn't loud, but it lasts.